And welcome back, guys. The news shocked the whole chess world. I guess that everyone knows what I'm talking about. The famous and renowned streamer and, first of all, player as well, Daniel Naroditsky, passed away. And yeah, it was a huge shock to the whole chess world. I anyway made a video about it just when I found out. And yeah, everyone is still visibly shaken, and therefore I wanted to make a bit of a more positive video about it, but still kind of in remembrance to him. And I wanted to show you one pretty nice game which I just came across. I was actually just going through Naroditsky's game for the past hour or so, just yeah, kind of seeing what he achieved over the years, and trying to look for some nice games which I could show to you. And that brought me to the game Naroditsky against Jakovenko from the year 2015, and it was played in the Team World Championship in 2015, where Naroditsky had the white pieces against Dmitry Jakovenko, who maybe some of you who have just learned chess recently haven't heard of. But he's a very, very strong Russian grandmaster, just hasn't really played at all the last couple of years. But I think his peak rating was something like 2770 or 2760. He was one of the world's best players for quite a few years in some of the 2010 years. That would be my guess, somewhere around that time. And let's just jump right into the game. So Naroditsky, obviously representing the United States in this tournament. The funny thing was actually going through Naroditsky's games was that, well, recently he hasn't really played many over-the-board tournaments, but it was quite important for me to show one classical game of him, because, I mean, everyone knows, every one of us knows how strong he is in Blitz and Bullet. But I guess that many people, including myself, haven't really seen any of his classical games, or at least many of them, just because he hasn't played so much recently, or not at all, basically. Just played online and some blitz events over the board. So he was white against Jakovenko. Naroditsky opened with e4 and went for the Italian, which yeah, was one of his main openings until for the coming years after that as well. And also the Spanish with d3. He was quite famous for winning some nice games there too. They did go for the classical gioco piano, the Italian, and after short castle now rook e1. The point of this move order is that that white is discouraging black from going d5. If you would start with c3, now it is possible for black to go for d5, which leads to another line. So that's the whole point of rook e1. Now d5 would be a little bit less logical, because after taking, white could grab the pawn on e5. And yeah, the important thing is that this does work out here, because in the end, this double attack does not, in fact, win back the rook. I mean, it does, but at the same time, the knight on d5 is hanging. And white would have two pieces for the rook, which generally is quite a good trade-off. And here it most certainly is for white. So in the game, Jakovenko played the move d6, now c3 and a6. We are still following sort of main territory here. And now Naroditsky went for the move bishop b3, which was kind of the main move for many, many years. But more recently, players started more or less completely shifting towards the move a4. The whole point of this is that in general, in the gioco piano, white wants to wait for black to play a6 and only then to go for a4. Because if you would go for a4 a bit earlier, for example here, then black would have the possibility to play a5, just stopping white's aim of gaining space on the queenside for good. Of course, after c3, it's also possible to play a5 here, but now the whole point is that white doesn't really want to play with a4, but instead tries to use the b5 square for himself, sometimes with ideas of bishop b5. So yeah, that's some of the details in the gioco piano. But Jakovenko went for the move a6, and now bishop b3 was played. So this was kind of the older way of playing the position. The idea is just to regroup the knight to g3, and then often trying to launch an attack on the king side. Jakovenko played bishop a7, h3, very logical, just stopping knight g4 for good. H6, knight bd2, rook e8, knight f1, so the typical plan as I pointed out earlier. And now after bishop e6, Naroditsky played the move bishop c2, just keeping the bishops on the board. And now actually d4 would be a major threat, since the e4 pawn is well protected, and after d4 also d5 is going to be a major threat which black needs to take care of. So therefore, black plays d5 himself. This is kind of the way which, black is equalizing in this line, but it leads to a playable game. And as we will see, there are quite some possible dangers for black in those positions too. They're not easy at all to play for the black side, just because white does have some attacking potential on the king side later on. Naroditsky played queen e2, keeping the tension in the center. Also possible is to take on d5, but after queen takes d5 or bishop takes d5 too, maybe this is even a bit more precise, black is not really in any danger. For example, knight g3, queen d6 just leads to a very playable game for black. Knight f5 doesn't really do anything for the moment just yet, because black could go queen e6 or queen d7, but it also does lead to a playable game. Naroditsky played queen e2, also avoiding the trade of queens. For example, if white would start with knight g3, then black could take and trade the queens and has a very comfortable endgame like this. So Naroditsky played the move queen e2, and now b5 was Jakovenko's move, just gaining space on the queen side. Maybe also b4 can be an idea. And basically, as I said, just trying to gain space on the queen side, so very natural. Also, one idea could be that after black takes on e4, then after d takes e4, there might be some ideas with bishop c4 along the lines. And that's maybe also one reason why Naroditsky played a little bit mysterious looking move rook d1, so that now after d takes e4, the rook is very well placed on the d file already, attacking black's queen on d8. So obviously black is not doing that, and instead he went for d4, which does make a lot of sense now that white has placed the rook on d1, and it's probably not going to be doing much on d1 now since black played d4. And black does have some options to play on the queen side. For example, black could take on c3, b takes c3, and then b4. That could be quite a dangerous strategical idea when the d4 square could become weak. But also a5 followed by a4, just further gaining space on the queen side is a typical idea. And actually we saw that in the game by Jakovenko too. So here he played the move a5. And here a very nice move by Naroditsky, which I really enjoyed, the move bishop b3. Since after a5 now, well, first of all, what does white do in this position? Black does have a lot more space. So generally white should try to do something on the king side. But if you would start attacking with knight h2 or knight h4, black would simply just go a4, and now this bishop on c2 is not really joining the game anymore. Also, black has ideas to just defend the king side with bishop c5 followed by bishop f8. Also, as I mentioned earlier, at some moment taking on c3 followed by b4 is quite a serious idea, and black would probably have the advantage here already. It's not really clear how white is gonna facilitate a strong attack on the king side. So that's why Naroditsky played the move bishop b3, just trying to be in time to trade this bishop, which is anyway not really great on c2 if black is in time to play a4 in this position. So bishop b3, Jakovenko played the move a4, bishop takes e6, and now the move rook takes e6. Interesting is also that fe6 is actually possible in this position, which would restrict the knight on g3, but now black's pawn structure, of course, is a little bit weakened, and white could try, for example, something like bishop d2 followed by rook c1, and black is certainly a little bit worse here just because of his pawn structure. So rook takes e6 is definitely a healthier way to recapture. Now knight f5. And this is kind of the whole concept of white now, so he wants to play for some initiative on the king side. And so far Jakovenko has played the game really well, but now he went a little bit, not with the best direction with the move a3. Instead, knight e7 would have been quite precise, just trying to exchange this pretty annoying knight on f5. Also, you can try to strengthen the center by going c5 at some moment, and here black would have sufficient play and the position would be balanced. But Jakovenko played the move a3. Now, of course, white should not take this pawn because then the pawn on c3 would be hanging and knight e4 would come next. But instead, Naroditsky played the move queen c2, now shifting his focus towards the queen side, since black is moving some pawns there, and pawns cannot move backwards. As we all know, he tries to use those created weaknesses which black has just did. And also at the same time, now actually white could think of taking on a3 since the pawn on c3 is going to be protected. So now black needs to make a decision on the queen side, and he takes on b2, which is very logical. Bishop takes b2, d takes c3, and now bishop takes c3. And now Naroditsky's queen on c2 is placed really nicely along the half open c file, and at some moment the pawn on c7 could also be weak, where the queen on c2 is placed nicely now. Jakovenko played the move queen to e8. b4 was an option here, which might be a bit of a better move. This was kind of what I had in my notes here, and queen f8. But it also does look a little bit passive, just trying to defend everything with bishop b6. It's not really clear what black's plan in this position is. Maybe he could at some moment play g6, trying to kick out the knight. Another plan could be knight d7 followed by knight c5. Of course, black's dream would be to get the knight to e6 and then play for the d4 square. But it does look like white does have a lot of activity in this position too. So Jakovenko played the move queen e8. Now queen b2, increasing the pressure on the pawn on e5. Now rook b8, also b5, the b5 pawn was hanging, of course, that was another point of the move queen b2. So rook b8, rook ac1, very natural but nice moves from Naroditsky, king h7, and now the move a3, just stopping b4 for good. Black could have played b4 here, but it does also weaken the c4 square. And in a position like this, white could even think about taking back with the f-pawn just to control the d4 square, and would have a very nice play. Like white can even try to play on both sides. I mean, at some moment, queen f2, queen g3 could be an idea. And of course, also just trying to double the rooks on the c-file, which does look pretty unpleasant for black. So Jakovenko went for the move king h7. Now a3 was played, as I said, stopping b4, g6, kicking out the knight on f5, now knight e3. I mean, at the same time, I should mention that g6 is, of course, also a weakening move, since you don't have the bishop flankered on the king side. If this diagonal opens up, then it could certainly mean some trouble for the black king, since he does not have the dark-squared defender near him. And here Jakovenko makes quite an interesting decision, but probably not a good one, which is to eliminate the knight on e3 by giving away his dark-squared bishop. Instead, his position was already quite difficult, and he should probably just do nothing. Like the best move according to the computer is rook b7 in this position. But this is nothing which black really wants to do here. Knight d7 would be another suggestion, but it does only allow the knight in towards the d5 square. And again, black would need to defend with something along those lines. But looks very, very bad for black, honestly. Like if I look at it just on the board, yeah, looks like a very depressing position. White has just so many ideas, like h4, h5 could be an idea at some point. So many different tactics which black needs to watch out for. So already black was in a very difficult decision, and therefore understandably tried to change the character of the position by taking on e3. And only after f takes e3 now he wants to regroup the knight so that knight d5 is not possible. But of course, bishop takes e3 has quite a big downside, and that is that all of the dark squares are weakened here. And this is actually the moment of the game which really inspired me to show it to you, because here Naroditsky managed to find a very, very nice way to strengthen the position, which I really enjoyed. So if you want to use this as an exercise, you can pause the video and try to find white's best way to continue the game here. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the move now which Naroditsky played. It's the move bishop e1. And his whole idea was to bring the bishop to g3, which then, first of all, if the bishop is not on c3 anymore, then he can double the rooks on the c-file. And also with the bishop on g3, the idea of going d4 is going to be even stronger. If you would go for d4 immediately, then black could take here and then take on e4, when white still surely has great compensation because the king is quite weak, but it's not entirely clear yet. And yeah, if now we imagine the bishop on g3, of course it would be much better because just the knight on c6 would be hanging. So Naroditsky went for this maneuver, which I really, really liked. Now bishop g3, and Jakovenko went for the move b4 here, trying to get rid of some pawns on the queen side, but Naroditsky made a wise decision just not to exchange the pawns, also keep the b-file closed, and went for the very calm move a4. Now rook a6, Jakovenko's move, and now queen b3. That was all pretty logical from white, just protecting the pawn on a4. Also immediately possible was the move d4, which is also very, very scary for black, but I really like Daniel's approach, just protecting everything and playing a logical move, and so d4 is not really running away at the moment. Jakovenko went for the move rook b6, and now finally it was time for the move d4. Instead of rook b6, there were some moves which were a bit better objectively speaking, like queen e7 or something like that. But also here, black will have to suffer after the move d4. It's not entirely clear why this should be so much of a better version. So rook b6, Daniel played d4, and now black went for the concrete continuation, e takes d4, and e takes d4, now knight a5. But here already the position is opening up, and black is in a pretty bad shape here. Taking on d4 makes things a little bit worse from the objective side, but already the position was very difficult at this point. I mean, rook e7 is the move which black needs to play according to the computer, and after rook f1, for example, f6, just trying to hold everything together at the moment, but black is basically busted strategically, and white has a couple of ways to strengthen the position. Maybe bringing the knight to c4 could be a nice idea now, and then doubling up on the f-file. So black's position should generally be lost here as well. So Jakovenko went for the trade on d4 and now went knight a5. Here Naroditsky played the move queen d5, centralizing the queen. c5 was played, d takes c5. I mean, what else can black do? Otherwise the pawn on c7 will just fall, and the knight on a5 is hanging at this point too. So c5, d takes c5, knight f6, and here Naroditsky tried to go for the simplification with queen d8, which is completely satisfactory. He also had some other ways to convert to the full point at this moment, but this was a very clinical way. So he traded on e8, rook takes e8, and now rook d6. Which was a pretty important decision here too, because white wants black to take on d6 when after c takes d6 the pawn is a little bit more further to advance towards the d8 square. And just as an example, if black takes on e4, white can go d7, rook d8, and bishop c7, and at the end of the line is just a clear piece up, and white should be able to win without any problems. So Jakovenko went for the move rook c6, trying to set up some sort of a bind. And now, of course, white does not want to take on c6 when black actually wouldn't be any worse here, because the knight on c6 is blocking the pawn on c5 nicely. But instead, Naroditsky found the best way in this position, which is the move knight e5. And now the rook on c6 actually has to leave this cozy square, and Jakovenko decided to trade on d6. But now the same problem as earlier arises, that the pawn on d6 is just way too strong in this position. And black went for knight takes e4. Also b3 is possible here, but it also doesn't change much. White can go for d7, rook d8, and now bishop e1 is a nice way to win here, just also because of the fact that earlier there was the exact same move where the bishop came from c3 to e1 to g3, and now at the end the move bishop e1 is also once again going back there, is winning nicely, because there's no good way to cover the a5 square. And if the knight goes back to b7, and for example white could go rook c7, and it becomes very difficult to find a square for the knight. If, for example, knight d6, bishop c3 stops the b pawn, and this d pawn, or actually the a pawn, is going to decide the game pretty soon. So in the game, Jakovenko played knight takes e4, and d7 was played rook d8, and also here the move bishop e1. As I said earlier, this was kind of the second reason for me to show this game, just because it was such a nice maneuver to go from c3 to e1 to g3, and then from g3 back to e1 in this position. So the pawn on b4 cannot really be defended. Jakovenko tried f6, now rook c8, knight b7, he went for the trade, and here bishop takes b4. All of that was good enough. There was also nothing wrong with going back with the knight, for example, but this was a very good way to end the game, and now pushing the pawn, and the knights cannot stop the pawn. The knight can go to b6, but now he's losing one of the knights. And the pawn on a7 is deciding the game. I mean, also the end of the game is actually very beautiful. Like, I didn't even realize that earlier when I was looking through the game. What mostly stood out to me was this idea with bishop e1 to g3, but also his technique was very nice here, that he just pushed the pawn like this. I mean, I would immediately be thinking to going bishop e7 here, and then just promoting on the spot. But now actually the pawn is not really reaching the a7 square. So that was, I mean, also here white should be winning by bringing the king, but it was very precise from him to, very precise of him just to immediately push the a pawn, and see it so far that here white has to move bishop a5 and is winning back the piece. And here after king g7, king f2, king f7, king e3, black resigned. One sample line can go, for example, king e8, bishop a5, king d7, king e4, king c6, and if black manages to pick up this pawn, the knight still can never leave the a8 square. White can pick up all these pawns, and the funny thing is the knight actually never leaves the a8 square. Whenever it goes away, then white just easily wins the pawn endgame, and if black wants to follow the bishop, white can always go back to a5. So I think that's a nice way to end this analysis. That was a really beautiful game, which I really enjoyed. I hope you guys liked this analysis too, and I just wanted to shine some light on Naroditsky not only being an amazing commentator and online and over the board blitz and bullet player, but also very strong player in over the board classical chess. So I'm really curious what is gonna come out in the next few days to follow. I don't really want to get too much into all of the speculations, as I said in my previous video, yeah, just want to give I just think it's kind of fair to give his family and friends some privacy when it comes to that, and therefore I tried to only focus on the chess side today, which hopefully was also a nice change of topics for some of you guys who are as touched by this occurrence as I am. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. The Rook Endgame video is still not coming out, since I thought it would be a nicer thing to do something like this today, but most likely I'm planning to publish it tomorrow. So that's something which is gonna come out tomorrow. Anyway, thank you guys, and I'm gonna see you guys soon.